Okay, in this video we're just going to talk about the next iteration of the Panasonic GH6. So whether that's the GH7 or the GH6s or the GH6 II, no one really knows at this point, but the kind of rumour mill started up again about, a successor to the camera. And, although there's not any dates or anything firm, I just want to kind of go through really what I'd like to see in the next iteration of this camera. And I'd be interested in the comments to know what other people would like to see in it as well, because it's it's one of those things where I think there's people in one camp and people in another for what they want the next iteration to be, and I sort of feel like I'm in the minority, but I just kind of want to run through what I'd like to see in the next camera. So I just sort of, to start this, I've been using this camera since its release, and it's probably one of the most enjoyable cameras I've used for video work. I really like the body design of it, the stabilization's really solid, the video features are great, and you can shoot them all internally with the CF Express card. But, the obvious elephant in the room is the AF. So you've got the, this is still using the DFD system, and they've got PDAF now in the in a few of the cameras now, but the first Micro Four Thirds camera to come with it is the the G9 Mark II, and that's going to start shipping probably in the next week or two for a lot of people. So with the release of that, a lot of people have started talking about a new release of this, and I do find the AF on this, for the majority of the work I do, it's quite passable, but obviously the PDAF is a better focusing system. It's going to be more responsive, it's going to be better in low light, it's overall it's a better system, and that 100% is going to come to the next version of the GH line. It's just a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people that this really was the last Micro Four Thirds camera to not have it. So, first thing, PDAF, I think that's a no-brainer. That's going to happen. But I think for a lot of people, that's where it ends. They just want this camera with PDAF. And I really just think that would just be such a lazy and sloppy release. That's basically just the G9 Mark II in a slightly different body with, I guess, probably the same features that the G9 Mark II has now, the improved, DR boost implementation and so on. But I really don't I just don't see the point in that, why bother releasing that? From Panasonic's point of view, sure, that's a few extra pennies in the coffers, but it's just, that would be such a lazy release. I'd be really disappointed to see that as a release. And for me, owning the GH6, that PDAF is just, for me, that's just not worth the upgrade. If that's all that's there, it's it's not worth the selling this camera and then purchasing it. It's just not worth it to me. So for me, I really wouldn't want to see that. I mean, the GH6 has had some teething issues because it's the first to use a kind of bigger sensor, a new sensor that the footage looks really good from it. It's a really nice step up from when I was using the GH5, and there were a few issues with it. They had these streaking issues that were resolved a little bit in some firmware updates, and I appreciate that it's a it's a sensor thing that affects other cameras, but there was quite a it was quite noticeable in some shots in earlier versions of firmware, and you can still recreate that now. But some of that, I believe, was to do with DR boost, which in itself was a very clunky implementation, where to use it in vlog you've got to be at 2000 ISO, and that's quite high, and that gets quite noisy quite quickly, and you need ND filters in really light situations. So it's nice to see that on the G9 Mark II that's actually been improved. So a new implementation of that coming into the new camera, that's going to be good, really. But again, for me, that's not enough to make a what you would call a GH7. Maybe you could make that a GH6 Mark II, and that's a stopgap while they get some other kind of features into the camera. I think one of the things that some people missed, although this is a video-centric camera, was the fact that we lost the battery grip on the bottom of the camera. I mean, I do use it a little bit as a hybrid camera, so sometimes I do like having the battery grip, and I still use it on my GH5. So you know, for me that was a little bit disappointing that it was gone. It's not the end of the world. You know, I much prefer this body design. I don't expect Panasonic to make a whole new grip to fit a whole different body. I would much rather have this body design without the battery grip than them use the S5 Mark II body, or the, you know, the G9 Mark II. They're basically the same body type. This one, I think, for video is a much better design. You know, it's got the things like the flip up screen, the tally lamps, the lock dial. It's just more, I think, more geared to kind of video. So I'd much rather keep that kind of design. And quite a few people have asked me if I was going to sort of sell the GH6 or use the GH6 as you know, a secondary camera and get the G9 Mark II. And for me, it doesn't really interest me as a video camera because for one, they've downgraded down to you know, you can't shoot a lot of it internally, which means then you're left using the SSD drive, which is great. I like the SSD drive implementation, but my real issue with this camera in terms of you know, overall performance is the battery life. You know, the BLK22, sure, it's for photography, it's fine. I still wouldn't say it's setting the world alight, but for video, it's an incredibly lackluster battery. You know, you're getting absolute maximum like 90 minutes video if you're lucky. So then that leads you to having to kind of use something like a power bank to charge the camera, which is great. Again, I think it's brilliant. You get a few extra hours out of that. Like, you know, it's a great design. I really like that. But then once you've done that, the SSD port or the USB port, the USB Type-C, is tied up with the SSD drive. So, you know, you can't do that anymore with a lot of the better video modes on there. So, you know, as a video camera, for me, it's not really that interesting a proposition. So I'm really hoping that in the new version of the GH line, we either get a better battery, which I sort of feel like at this point is a bit unlikely because they really like to think the BLK22 is great. But I mean, falling short of that, it would be having dual USB-C ports, and then for me that actually would become a more interesting proposition because you don't have to worry so much then about, you know, you can record stuff to SSD, you can still power the camera over USB-C through the PD power bank, and then, you know, that becomes a whole different situation then. And for me, that would be, you know, the preference. That would be a nice upgrade there, you know, in the body rather than you know, just the little extra features. So one big one a lot of people didn't like on the GH6 was the card slots. And, you know, you've got slot 1, CF Express Type B, slot 2, SD card, preferably V90 in there for a lot of the modes. Some of them are pretty big modes. And, you know, for me, to be honest, I think that's great because, you know, the CF Express card is brilliant because you can shoot everything internally. You know, you can do ProRes, you can do all intra video, all that kind of stuff. If you're doing photography, makes no difference. You could have 2 SD cards and, you know, it's not going to make any difference for you really. But for video, you know, for me, I thought that was great. And if anything, I would rather them, for the consistency, I'd rather them do away with the SD slot and just have 2 CF Express Type B slots. And I know they're a little bit more expensive, but, you know, you can always use 2 NVMe cards and then it's not really that expensive. I did a little video about NVMe cards in a, you know, another video. If you really wanted backup, or you can still do relay to an extent, but for backup, it's yeah. What I think what I'd really like to see is, yeah, either 2 CF Express Type Bs, or I think ultimately what I'd really like them to do, and I've talked about it in other videos, is just have the ability to get the video to back up onto an SSD in some way, you know, whether it's simultaneously or whether it sort of drip feeds it onto the SSD once it's been recorded onto the card. It would just be nice if that functionality exists. You know, if they can get the two to talk to each other, then, you know, that for me, that would be huge. That's a big upgrade in itself. And then the big one for me, like the main one, you know, for it to be a next iteration of the camera, I really think it's got to be some type of raw recording. You know, if it's a video focused camera, the next step has to be raw recording, really. I mean, you know, Panasonic are already licensing ProRes, not ProRes RAW, obviously that has to be done through external Atomos recorders. But, you know, and I understand there are issues with Red. They've got like the patent for internal RAW recording, but there's got to be something that Panasonic can do to kind of push that now. They've got this external SSD capability, you know, could they sell their own SSD that also offers ProRes RAW, like bundled in or something? You know, and then it just gives you a bit of an easier life where you don't always have to use a really bulky recorder, and you've got to obviously power that as well. You've got the weight, you've got the extra size. You know, it'd be really nice if there's something they can do. Or kind of failing that, I mean, you know, if they can kind of push their own raw video, you know, some kind of Panasonic raw video, and you know they're really good at doing the raw kind of codecs in the camera, like the all intra compression in the camera is really good. Like it's a really nice implementation of that. So it'd be really interesting to see if they could make some kind of you know, raw video format that then could go into the camera. And I think that's one of those things that, you know, rather than putting PDAF into a camera, which, let's be honest, cameras have had that for years. it's one of those things that would really gain them a lot of traction. It's you know, if they can kind of sidestep the you know, the litigation some way and even make it an add-on or make it internal through their own kind of raw processes, it's one of those things where when the Blackmagic Pocket came out, I just thought, wow, that is, you know, almost like the perfect camera. But if they could cross that over from being a cinema camera into, you know, it doesn't have to be a full hybrid, but more of a, you know, have more kind of mirrorless features, like, you know, all the assist tools that you get on this, and having the, certainly the kind of, the in-body stabilization, and, you know, just all those additional parts of it, it would just make it such a great camera. And now we're talking, you know, a few years have passed since then, but I still feel like there's got to be a bit of demand there for that type of camera, because that would still be quite a unique camera on the market. And it's just, yeah, it's certainly something I'd like to see anyway. I wonder if there's possibly even some kind of scope there for Blackmagic to kind of license B-RAW to Panasonic to kind of do it internally. And I know that maybe doesn't make sense from a product point of view, but if you think about it, you know, Blackmagic are not really rivaling any of these mirrorless cameras. You know, they make cinema cameras essentially, so, you know, they'd be putting it into a different product that they don't have a competitor in the market for at the moment. Maybe in the future they will do. I don't know if that would sort of stunt them from doing that, but they've never seemed to have shown interest in that hybrid market. You know, they're part of the L-Mount Alliance. Like I said, they don't compete with the GH line, so for them to put B-RAW into the camera, that would be a really nice thing. And, you know, it would be healthy for the DaVinci Resolve kind of user base as well. You know, it'd keep pushing that. But I appreciate it probably takes away some of the sales from the kind of the video assist monitor. So, you know, from that point of view, it's a difficult one. But, you know, like I say, for me, that's the big one. I think if they can bring something like that into the camera line, then it would totally kind of rejuvenate it. And, you know, that's something they can roll out across full frame as well if they wanted to. So it's just, it would be a really big thing. And then, you know, some of the other bits are they're just small bits. They're almost, you know, they're kind of iterations really. So some of them could even really be firmware updates. You know, it'd be nice if we get live cropping back. The S5 Mark II got it, the GH6 didn't. I don't really understand that as a decision, but, you know, maybe it's to do with the kind of full sensor down to 4K. I don't know, but, you know, that would be nice if that comes back. Obviously, open gate, 60 frames a second. That would be a really nice headline feature for the next camera. You know, I shoot a lot of video in 60 frames a second. So if we could get open gate in 60 frames, that would be really good. They've kind of fixed some of the kind of distortion issues with open gate in the G9 Mark II with electronic stabilization and things like that. So that's really nice. So, you know, the scope there to kind of push that forward. Having more ProRes options, 4K options and open gate would be really good. And it's just, again, little things like, the punch in for the focus. They just had an update for this on the S5 Mark II, I believe it was. They got like a 20 times punch in now. That would be nice to have on the GH6, because 6 times punch in is not particularly fantastic for video. Like, it's not always, ideal. And again, just things like having 2-channel audio when you're not using the XLR1. Again, something they should really push across all the cameras, because it's just a pain having 4-channel audio when 2 of the tracks are dead tracks. The other one is quite a basic one, just the HDMI display on the GH6. For whatever reason, with this version of the camera, when you plug in a HDMI monitor, you have to choose between the monitor or the camera where you have the display. And it'd be nice if you could have it on both, or just it would be a useful thing. And yeah, I know that's probably quite extensive. I've probably been rambling on for 10 minutes, but it's I sort of feel like there's got to be a big headline feature for them to release another camera. I don't think a GH7 will come around in the next, even couple of years, but an iteration probably will. And for me, like I say, that's going to be quite a disappointing iteration if it's just got PDAF and a few features the G9 Mark II's got, because the G9 Mark II actually arguably is going to end up with more features, because they've given that all the video features. And I'd be very surprised if all the photo features end up in the next GH camera, because things like live composite. I mean, I might be wrong, but it seems like it's sort of gone one way and not come back the other. So I'd be interested to kind of see where they go with that. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you kind of what you'd like to see, and what you think the next camera should have. And yeah, I'd be interested to have a read through and kind of see what your thoughts are.